This podcast is a production of Queens Public Television in New York City. Visit us on the web at qptv.org.
Hey, I'm Mark Bacino, and this is Queens Creative. Hey everybody, thanks for listening and welcome to another episode of the Queens Creative Podcast coming to you from Queens Public Television in New York City. This episode is going to be very cool. On today's pod, I welcome singer-songwriter, producer, multi-instrumentalist, composer, Grammy-winner and Queens-born Danny Weinkauf. Widely known for his 20-plus year and counting run as bass player for indie rock icons They Might Be Giants, Danny has also played on numerous records as a studio musician, working with such acclaimed artists as Fountains of Wayne and David Mead. As a songwriter and composer, in addition to writing for They Might Be Giants, Danny has crafted tons of music for film, television, and advertising, all while writing and recording his own very cool brand of children's music as a solo artist. Listen in on this episode as Danny and I discuss his history with the Giants, what it's like to win a Grammy, his work in family music, and much more. Then, after our chat, be sure and stick around as Danny treats us to one of his cool original tunes. All right, let's jump right into my conversation from a few months back with the super talented Mr. Danny Weinkauf. Hey, Danny, welcome to Queens Creative. Thanks so much for doing this, man. Really great to have you on the pod.
Hey, thank you, Mark, man. It's great to do it, and I'm happy to be talking to you.
Cool. So, hey, look, I thought we'd dive right into the deep end and talk about your work with They Might Be Giants. You've been playing bass and writing songs for that band since the late 90s, and it seems like, it's been an incredible ride. Can you tell us a little about what that experience has been like for you?
Sure. It's funny, you're saying it's an incredible ride. Just before we just got this call, you called me now. I was speaking at dinner with my wife and a good friend of mine and relaying a story about us being on tour. And it just made me think like, oh, I got to do an interview. And there's so many things I could talk about.
I bet.
There's really so many. I mean, to just hit the highlights, like, we were nominated 3 times for Grammys and I went to the Grammys twice. And one of the 2 times that I was there, we won.
That's right. And we're going to talk about that a bit later too.
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. But it was just a phenomenal, we can talk more in detail about it later, but so that kind of thing, like recognition and the concert itself being great and, seeing your heroes and those sort of things. But then, there's lots of, there were lots of super fun, amazing gigs and things like that. Like what I was talking to my family and friend about prior to this call was that we had done we were on the JoCo cruise, the Jonathan Colton cruise, and we were supposed to play a show in San Juan, and there was like a hurricane after several acts had played, but right before we were supposed to play. And they canceled our show and had to, sort of rescue our gear and shut everything down and send people back to the ship. And we wound up doing the show on the ship, but had to leave the ship by midnight because some of us were leaving we were not continuing on with the cruise. Mm-hmm. And there were all kinds of regulations and international things. And we were under penalty of there were so many circumstances that were happening. It felt like we were in like the most exciting James Bond movie ever or something. And that was just one day, one gig.
Right, that's just one.
It was so memorable and so much fun and so exciting. And, we played at Centennial Park for like 60,000 people.
Oh, man.
During a time where we had a reporter from the New Yorker magazine on tour with us, mm-hmm. Michael Azerrad, who wrote a famous book on Kurt Cobain, et cetera. He was with us, and he's a musician, and he's a fun guy. And so, we walk out on stage, and 60,000 people are cheering, and he's on stage with us to see what it feels like. And moments like that, I just I took the time to like be in the moment and look around and think like, wow, this really is something.
That's cool that you did that, because a lot of times it just goes by you and you don't, you're not in the moment.
I'm sure there were so many things that other guys in the band would remember that I don't remember just because I was, too busy worrying about what I was playing or whatever it was. But, the main thing that I have to say is, I've been super fortunate, not in only that They Might Be Giants is a successful band and has had longevity, sort of in an outlier kind of way. They've forged a career that, I think very few bands have done in the way that they have. But that the personalities involved, the two Johns and Dan Miller and Marty Beller and I, the way that we all get along and respect each other and work together is really, it's remarkable. I've played with other bands and worked with other people, and there are a lot of people that I like and love and that sort of thing. But this is, it was an outstanding, just stroke of luck that I wound up with these people and got to be working with them for all this time.
Well, you can't belittle your talents either. I mean, you're there for a reason.
I hope that I deserve to be there, but I just it's these guys are remarkable talents and like brilliant guys and including not just John and John, but Dan and Marty. They're composers. They write for television. They write songs. They play their instruments well. They're, like genuinely gentlemen. It's not like sex, drugs, and rock and roll with They Might Be Giants, as many people might guess. It is a very civilized and rewarding artistic group of people to be with. So, the overall feeling that I have looking back at the careers, there were lots of amazing fun. We did Conan O'Brien 13 times or something.
That's crazy.
We did many of the other late night shows and Blues Clues and like kids shows and had songs on television and all kinds of things. But the overarching feeling I have is just like of gratitude to I know that I'm going to be going back on tour with those guys in the fall. Mm-hmm. And, I guess you're aware, but maybe some of the people aren't aware that, we started to tour for the first time in 27 months, just about a month ago or so in June. And after the first show, John Flansburgh was in a terrible car accident.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, he broke 7 of his ribs, wound up in the hospital. So he's still recovering. But the plan is that we will resume our touring in August, and it'll be that much more sort of celebratory when we can get back on stage, because it's been 29 months, and Flansy's with us. There were moments where I was getting texts that night where I knew he was in a terrible car accident and had to be pulled from the car, but I didn't know the extent of it, and
it's scary.
I was so grateful to learn that he was okay. So. Yeah, there's that.
right, for sure. That's a whole nother, the personal side of it too. I mean, aside from the professional side.
Right, and because I've played with They Might Be Giants, it's opened other doors, and it enabled me to have a career writing jingles and writing music for television, and then writing my own children's records. And I have, like 6 albums out under my own name. But I started doing that with They Might Be Giants, and probably wouldn't have ever gotten into it had I not done it with them first. So, I owe a lot to those guys.
Now, I wanted to rewind a little bit and go back to the very beginning. How does little Danny Weinkauf, born in Flushing Hospital, as he told me before the interview, how does he find his way to music?
It was little Daniel Stephen Weinkauf.
Daniel Stephen.
My father's name is Stephen, and he gave me and both of my brothers the middle name Stephen.
Cool.
So we're all Stephen.
Nice.
In the middle. But I was born in Flushing. I later lived in Astoria, and then I lived in Auburndale. Mm-hmm. And living in Auburndale was one of the best places I've ever lived. But how did I get started with the music?
Yeah.
That's the question. Okay. For me, it was I guess AM radio. Mm-hmm. Like WABC was the radio station that was played a lot when I was a kid.
Yep,
I remember Imus, I think, was on the station at that point.
Like Dan Ingram, those guys.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And my mom worked in a store called Sam Goody's.
Oh,
which
sure.
I don't know if they have anymore today.
No, I think they're gone.
Yeah, it was a record store, but it was a record store that sold sheet music a few different instruments, guitars and drums and things.
I bought a guitar from Sam Goody, I think, back in like the early 80s.
There you go. Wow. So my mom worked in Sam Goody. So, occasionally she'd, I'd go to see her work and look around the store and stuff. And I remember, from hearing AM radio and just being alive in the world, I remember really having an affinity for the Beatles. To me, they stood out. Like I liked other songs, but when I heard them, I was like, wow, I really, really love this. Mm-hmm. So I was in her store one day, and there was like a magazine rack, and one of the magazines had Paul McCartney on the cover. So I asked my mom if I could get the magazine, and then I read the magazine, and in that magazine, it stated that at the time, they recommended that or made maybe a list of the best of the Beatles, and they put Sgt. Pepper's at the top. Mm-hmm. So I then proceeded to get Sgt. Pepper's, and I've been a fan, ever since. So that, and, school, public school. I went to public school. I played the trumpet in third grade. I had a pretty good general music teacher that, recruited me to do like the school plays and stuff, which I probably would not have volunteered to do. I didn't really have any interest in acting or anything, but she wanted me to get up there and sing.
Oh, wow.
So, that, helped me learn about reading music and rhythms and things. And then, my mom having access to records, I didn't buy a ton of records. I didn't really have much money, but I did have exposure to it. So that was it.
Wow.
And then, the radio.
Right. Yeah, I remember that too, man. That the AM radio thing was like a big thing because what I remember about it as a kid was that, especially that station too, is that they like played everything. They would play like, they would play like a Cheap Trick song, like I Want You to Want Me, next to like an ABBA track or something. There was always
sure.
Like, it was like hard rock or and then I remember they would play like a Genesis track or something. It was just there was no sort of genre specific radio. It was just like whatever was cool, whatever they thought was
funny.
good.
Yeah, the thing that I remember is hearing Stairway to Heaven and then Helen Reddy.
Right, that's even a better example. It's even a better example.
And I remember thinking, like, I knew my mom liked the Helen Reddy song, and I just thought, like, wow. That other song was really long. It had such a cool guitar solo. Now we're listening to the stuff Mom likes.
Right. Yeah, man. I mean, it was just like that. Funny. It was great, and it's funny. That really, I think that speaks to the kind of music that both you and I make. Is it's informed by that. It's informed by
sure.
that for that sort of thing. So now I want to jump a little further down the timeline. In 1997, you're in a band called Lincoln.
Right.
With current Giants guitarist Dan Miller, you mentioned before. You guys get signed to Polygram, you release an album, you guys hit the road, opening for folks like Susanna Hoffs, Marcy Playground, and They Might Be Giants. And then Lincoln kind of prematurely falls apart, right? Like, what's the story behind that band? I was curious to ask you about that.
Huh. Okay. Well, I don't know if prematurely fell apart. Maybe from the outside it seemed that way, but yeah, just to step back a little bit, that and I think this may overlap the next question, but that time period where I was playing with Lincoln happened to be like a very, very exciting time for me in New York City, and my memory of the chronology of events is not. I'm not great with that, but it seems to me around the same time. I was recording with Lincoln, but then recording with Fountains of Wayne. And then Fountains of Wayne asked me to tour with them, but then Mike Viola asked me to tour with him. So I went and toured with him and then opened for They Might Be Giants with Mike Viola. And then the Lincoln record came out and I went on tour with them, opening for They Might Be Giants. And there was a lot of overlap. And different, within a few different bands. And it was really fun and really exciting. And, as you know yourself, the clubs, there were lots of places to play. In the mid-90s, there were plenty of places to play downtown New York. And lots of good bands, and I remember just, bouncing around from club to club and having a lot of gigs myself and just... It was just such an exciting time. And now my son is 22 and he's starting to write his own music. And a lot of those places that I really would love to show him and I would love for him to get to play in are gone.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, and even including like 48th Street where all the music shops were, that's gone too. And so, it's a different New York now. I'm still excited for him to make music, and so is he. But it's changed world. But Lincoln. I'll give you the quick rundown of the story from my perspective. There was a fellow named Chris Temple, who was a very talented singer and songwriter, who took an ad in the Village Voice, which is another thing that doesn't exist anymore. But that's where I met many of the people that I wound up working with, including Adam Schlesinger from Fountains of Wayne and
Right.
Chris and Scott Klass and other people. Chris ran an ad in the Village Voice. I went to his apartment. I met him. I talked to him for a few minutes, and I talked about like coming into a rehearsal studio to play with him or something. And he handed me a tape, and I got in my car to drive away, and I started listening to the tape, and the voice that I was hearing singing didn't make sense. To me, it didn't sound like it was coming out of the guy I had just spoken to. So I turned my car around and went and rang his doorbell again and said, "Hey, is this you in the recording?"
Right.
And he said, "Yeah." And I said, I want to be in this band." And I said, "I know we haven't played yet, but I want to be in this band." And
Right.
he's like, "Oh, okay. I like your enthusiasm, whatever." And I said, "Yeah, we're going to do this." So then we got together and we played. And I helped him basically. I at first, there was a drummer named Gonzalo Martinez who later played with Marcy Playground and some other bands. He and I had played in a band with an artist named Nate Outerkirk. So Nate's band had sort of past its prime or whatever. And I asked Gonzalo to play with me and Chris. So he joined Lincoln. And then we needed another person to round out the sound. And I had met Dan Miller. So I asked Dan Miller to come and audition. And then and we had some, I won't mention the names, but we had some guys who had played with some famous bands come and audition as the guitar player, and Dan was by far the best. And so the four of us became a band. We did a bunch of showcases, which were really exciting. Again, that time in New York was really fun. We managed to get signed, and they were throwing a lot of money at us in the recording studios, and well, not at us, but at the people that own the recording studio and the producer. And we made a record, and we toured a bunch. We toured with Marcy Playground. We toured with They Might Be Giants, and a bunch of different things. But it wasn't the chemistry between the four of us was very hard to put four of us and a tour manager / sound man in a van and travel all over the country following bands that were like on tour buses in hotels.
Right.
When you're the guys in the van, you drive all day to get to the gig, and then you play for a half hour, and then you get back in the van and drive a little bit and get a crappy hotel, and then wake up the next day and drive and hope you get to sound check on time.
On time, right.
While the other, the main band gets in their bus and sleeps while they're driving.
Right.
So it can be really grueling. And I think Chris especially he was really unhappy on tour. So it got more and more tense until finally Dan Miller decided he had had enough, and he left the tour when we were in North Carolina one day and just got his stuff, and we played tennis in a parking lot, and he got on the plane and went home, and then the three of us finished the tour. And then around that time, I had been subbing in They Might Be Giants for a bass player named Hal Cragen, who also played with Iggy Pop. And Iggy was needing him for gigs, so I would sub for him and They Might Be Giants. And then I showed up for a gig in Boston, and John Flansburgh came up to me before the show and said, "Hey, instead of being the sub, would you like to be the guy in the band?"
Wow.
And I said, "Of course I would, but I don't want to steal Hal's gig. He asked me to sub for him. He's a great guy and a great bass player." And Flans was like, "No, it's okay. I've already talked to him about it. He's okay with it, and he realizes he can't do both gigs. We want you." And then I continued with They Might Be Giants, and I got Dan Miller into that band about a month later. So,
cool.
Yeah.
Interesting, man. That's really, I was curious about Lincoln and that whole thing.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I listened to the one record we made, and I remember the gigs, and we used to play no matter who we were opening for. It seemed people would not know who we were, and by the end of our set, we would have won them over, and we'd be selling CDs, and it was that's a very hard thing to do in an opening band,
for sure,
and also very rewarding. When you when you realize you've got them, and they didn't know you from Adam when they walked in the room. It's a great feeling. So there was a lot of that, but then there was also the reality that, like, you know, we can't be at each other's throats in these close quarters all the time. It's just not. Nobody can live like that. So
yeah, nobody can. Right.
Yeah.
Something had to give.
Yeah.
Now, sticking with that mid-'90s time period for a minute, and you talked a little bit about this before. Aside from your own band, Lincoln, during that stretch, you were pretty busy working live and in the studio with some great musicians and bands, like you mentioned, like Fountains of Wayne, Candy Butchers, David Mead. In a sense, you were sort of, for me, it seemed like you were kicking off the beginnings of your sort of session / support musician, career. Now, how did you get involved in that? You touched on it a little bit, but how did you get involved in that kind of work specifically? Like, was that something that was intentional for you, or it sort of sounded like it just sort of happened from what you were talking about before? But I was just curious if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was intentional. I think my intention at the time was to actually be in a band, to be part of something that I was considered an actual band member, like a band like REM or something like that, where everybody contributes and that sort of thing. So although it did wind up that I ultimately became a sideman that writes occasionally for They Might Be Giants. I wasn't thinking myself first, like, oh, I'm like a virtuoso bass player and I'm going to like do that. It was more like, I feel like I'm a musical person and I happen to play the bass. And if I get with the right guys and we have the same sort of understanding of music and maybe we can come up with something that's going to be, that people want to hear and that we find rewarding. So it was more, coming from that place at that time, like, with Lincoln, although Chris did write the songs, it did very much feel like a band. Ultimately, I don't know, like, contractually how it would have, I don't think it would have ended up that way, unfortunately. But the way that we worked was, we did, the players had a huge amount of input in the way the record sounded and the way the live gig sounded and that sort of thing.
Right. It was collaborative.
Yeah. Oh, extremely. Like, right. Yeah, absolutely. So, and playing with TMEG is collaborative in that way as well. But
it seems like the best of both worlds in a sense with the Giants, because it's sort of like you could say, yes, maybe you're a sideman technically, but you're also a big part of that band.
Right. I'm a sideman, but I've been a sideman for this band for 24 years or something.
Right.
So, there's no revolving door of other players,
right.
Waiting to take my gig or something. Yeah.
Right. It's a band.
Yeah. Yeah. So in the 90s, I was looking to find the right people that I would, sort of go on tour with and continue to make records with and stuff. I wasn't thinking like, okay, I'm like a mercenary guy and there's, if I work hard, I can, make X amount of money if I play with this many bands or that sort of thing. It was more like, let me find the band. But just because of the way the downtown scene was and the clubs and stuff, I just kept bumping into the same people. I answered a Village Voice ad and went to meet the band, and it was Adam Schlesinger and Andy Chase and Dominique Duran from Ivy.
Right.
And we bonded, but then they wound up, instead of using a bass player, they got Mike Viola to play guitar with them. So I went to see them play a show because I was still friendly with them, even though I didn't get the gig. And Mike opened for them with Todd playing Candy Butchers. And I immediately went up to Mike and said, if you guys ever add a bass player to this band, please think of me. And then, a Village Voice ad came out, months later after I'd seen Mike and Todd play numerous times, and they were looking for a bass player. And I showed up and wound up getting the gig with them. And
you were great in that band, man, for sure. It was fantastic.
That was such a fantastic experience. Yeah. But also, Adam knew of me then and saw me play with Candy Butchers, and Fountains came around and he invited me to play with them. And so it was just him and Chris, and he asked me to come in.
For that first record,
yeah, the first record was just me, him, and Chris in a room. And everything happened very, very quickly. So it
now he was playing drums, right?
Out of necessity. Basically, he and Chris were, Adam, I think, Chris had written a couple of songs like Radiation Vibe and a couple of songs like that. And Adam had this idea like, hey, we're listening to some of these other bands, this band Weezer and some other things. And I think if we, like got Marshall Stacks and, sort of put our tongues further in our cheeks, we could do something that's really melodic pop, but that would sort of, grab the attention of people these days, that sort of thing. And that was sort of the mindset. And so we went in, like they literally sat in the radio bar and like made up joke titles for songs and then proceeded to write the lyrics for the joke titles. And then, we got in a rehearsal room one day and recorded 4 songs in the studio. And then Adam came back to me a few weeks later. He's like, listen, we got an offer. Do you want to finish the record with us? Wow. I was like, okay, like, sure. Yeah. So it really did. But I think that was part of the charm of it was they didn't let themselves overthink it or make it too precious.
Right,
and even,
right.
With the approach to the bass, we spoke about it before we even started recording. And it was like, I wanted to be as simple as I could and just kind of keep it steady so that Adam could play the drums to my bass playing. And then we could, layer the overdubs on top of that. And, it was like very strategic. Like this is going to be really straightforward and it's going to be about the songs and the melodies and it was really, really fun. And like I said, just things were overlapping for me. So I remember we did the first 4 songs. Adam managed to somehow convince people that we could make a full record. Went back, did a couple more rehearsals, and then went back in the studio like another day and a half. I remember in the middle of one of the days, I was laying on the couch because I think I had the flu. And I said to Adam, this other band that I'm playing in is doing a video right now. Can I leave for like an hour and shoot the video and then come back and do the tracks later? And he was like, yeah, go ahead. So there I am with the flu, like running to shoot a video with another band and then going back and finishing the Fountains record. And, it was exciting and fun. And
yeah, it was definitely a good time, in New York.
Yeah,
and it seemed like a sort of a hotbed of a lot of great music.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So it wasn't sort of intentional. It just
no. I don't think I had the confidence to think that I could be a session musician, and I don't think I really didn't start playing the bass till I was like 23 years old. So
really, wow.
I didn't have a lot of time under my belt, so I just sort of thought of myself more as like I have a good musical ear, I think. And I'm getting better and better with the bass as I, spend more time doing it. So, it was more that, like I said before, the attitude of like, let me find, some like-minded musicians and see what I can do.
Right. No, it makes sense, man. Totally makes sense. So I wanted to jump forward a little bit from that time. And I thought we'd touch on 2009. They Might Be Giants takes home the Grammy, and you touched on this a little earlier, for Best Children's Album. And that was for Here Come the 1, 2, 3s, which featured the song number 2 that you wrote and sang.
Right.
Now, I have to stop everything right here and just ask you, how does it feel to actually win a Grammy? I'm really curious about that.
Many years have passed now, so I've had a little more time to think about it. At the time, it was really exciting in a kind of surprising way. Like, I when I see the Oscars or the other award show, Golden Globes or the Grammys or whatever, if you're in the industry at all, you realize there's a lot of politics involved, and if you have a big company behind you, whether it's a record company or a studio or whatever, then you're going to get way more pitches and more people that might potentially vote for you and that sort of thing. And it doesn't necessarily come down to quality. It really doesn't. Mm-hmm. So, there's that reality of it, I think. But having said that, being there in the moment and hearing, They Might Be Giants announced to win the album, and having my wife there with me and my bandmates who I loved, and their, significant others, it was thrilling. It was absolutely thrilling. We were happy to win it, and the time that we won, again, we went a couple of times, but the time that we won, Stevie Wonder played that night.
Wow.
He is one of my all-time greatest heroes. And, I was like at eye level where I was sitting in the audience from Stevie Wonder was like,
Right.
And he played twice. So he played earlier in the evening with the Jonas Brothers, which was a bizarre combination. But he played to end the show. So he's ending the Grammys, and my wife and I are standing there like sort of still glowing and hugging each other. And the camera panned to us for like a full 8 seconds. So on the national broadcast, there was my wife and I standing, smiling. And so people were texting me. I'm at the Grammys and I'm getting texts from my friends. I'm looking at you on TV right now, So that's ridiculous. Who cares? But in the moment, it was really fun and really exciting. And
No, that's great.
And, between the couple of Grammys that we went to, I saw Stevie Wonder and Al Green and Radiohead and U2 and Coldplay and Adele and Jay-Z and, like the list goes on, B.B. King.
Wow.
And like just so many people whose music I admired were part of the show. And then, with the night before they have an awards for Lifetime Achievement.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the times the Four Tops won. And I love the Four Tops, man. That some of that singing kills me. I feel like that's what a man sounds like, and Bernadette, that kind of thing. It's just like
Right.
so raw and real and
Yeah.
beautiful, and some, several of the original members had passed. So the gentleman that was accepting the award, he was literally tearing up, at that stage of his life. He was an older man.
Mm-hmm. To be
recognized. And I was really touched and I was happy to be, and this is it's the night before and the television cameras are not there and it's a smaller venue and blah, blah,
Mm-hmm.
blah. And I thought this is fantastic. This guy deserves the credit. He deserves the acknowledgement.
Right.
And, and there were other artists too that were there. Roy Haynes, the famous jazz drummer, was acknowledged and people like that. I thought this is not what I thought it might be. I ran into Charlie Hayden, the bass player.
Mm-hmm.
They have the ceremony where they give you they give you a medal if you're nominated, and then they take pictures of you, and there's a buffet and whatever. And I'm walking around and I almost bumped into Charlie Hayden and I saw him and said, I just, it's like, man, I've been listening to you on records for years and years and years. And thank God you're here, that you're nominated.
Right.
And it probably doesn't even matter because, I'm sure you're recognized all over the world, but I'm thrilled to meet you and thank you for everything. And, he just laughed. He was like, he was very humble. And
Yeah. I mean, aside from winning, it just sounds like winning a Grammy. It just sounds like the experience alone was just amazing.
yeah, I can put it in a bio that I won a Grammy, but the rest of it was really it was really something. It was,
That's the real.
The memories that my wife and I have together.
Right.
Yeah. I actually, since I've been making the children's albums myself, I actually tried a couple of times to see if I could, get myself in the running for the nomination as an absolutely independent artist, which is, nearly impossible. But I did push for it just because my daughter wants to go. And when we went the first time,
it's a good
she
reason.
said, "Daddy, if you ever go again, you have to bring me." And I said, "Okay, honey." And then we went again. And I did not bring her.
Oh, man.
And she still to this day is like, "You owe me. You owe me one. You got it. You have to be nominated again and bring me. I don't care if you win. I want to go with you to the." So,
you're a young
in my
man.
heart of hearts, I want to go back with my daughter.
You got the time. It can happen.
Yeah, well,
it can certainly
we'll
happen.
see. But it's that would be something, but it's not that important. It's
Right. It's an amazing experience. It sounds like overall.
Yeah,
Just
it
amazing.
was thrilling and fun, and and then we made the record that we thought was the best children's record we ever made, and we didn't win. So
Yeah, it's a lot of politics.
Yeah. Well, and that time, Pete Seeger was also up for the same award, and he had turned 90.
Mm-hmm.
And he made a record they made a record with a bunch of children singing some of his songs. And I think the record's probably great. I don't know, but he deserved it. He's an American icon. It's like, of course, give him as many awards as you can.
Sure.
I was like, okay, we all knew when we were going there. We're like, it's Pete Seeger. I voted for him. It's whatever. So yeah,
If you're going to lose, you lose to Pete Seeger. You're probably okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I thought we'd switch gears a little bit now and talk a little bit about your parallel career as a composer for film and television and advertising. Now, in doing that work, you've created music for a wide range of clients like Dunkin' Donuts, Sesame Street, MTV, CBS Sports. The list goes on and on. Could you explain to folks a little about the creative process behind that kind of work? Like, how you actually go about writing music for picture?
Well, a lot of the work that I've done is to picture, but it's not the same as like film scoring would be. It's not to the same degree. Like film scoring can be a little more specific, where you would have thematic motifs that would apply to like characters, that sort of thing. And
recurring kind of stuff.
Yes. And also, it might be really more specifically to the action on camera and that sort of thing. A lot of the stuff that I've done is either, a 30-second commercial or a 60-second commercial, or music for a reality show or things like that, or sports shows where it's really about creating a mood with like an arc. So, the beginning of the piece is starting softer and it has to build and has to get tense and then, come to a crescendo because, the football players are going to get on the field and bash their helmets together. So, you know what I mean? So that it's like a very smaller version of what a full on film composer would do, which is, Marty and Dan do full on film composing. So they're, they get into that world as well. I haven't really done that kind of work, but I've done the other work. And a lot of times it's whoever is producing the video part of it, whether it's a commercial or if it's a television show or something, they'll have a temp track. They'll have some kind of music in place that they think works for the visuals for whatever reason. Maybe it's the mood of the music and the tempo. Other times they won't, and they'll just say, we need something that's very bright and poppy, and that says sunshine and oranges. And it might not be a commercial for oranges, but that's the vibe they want.
That's the vibe.
And then you have to interpret, okay, this person says they want sunshine and oranges. Do they mean the Beach Boys sunshine and oranges? Do they mean like a techno thing? So then you may ask more questions to get a little more direction. Sometimes you write a piece of music that you think is perfect for what they described, and you send it to them and they say, oh, no, not like this, because we want, something else. And then you feel like, well, you should have said that in the first place, but okay. And then you're back to, you start all over. So it takes a tough skin, I have to say. As one of my friends who had been doing it longer than I did one time said to me very wisely, like, you have to be prepared, like in the jingle business. His thing was like, be prepared to send in 30 tracks, and for every 30 tracks, you win one.
Right. Wow.
And if you can have that mindset, like, it's okay, you sent it, it's gone. Don't worry about it. If you get the call back again that they're going to use it, great. But if not, it's just another piece of music you wrote and it's okay.
No expectations. Right.
It helped a lot to, I was lucky. Like the first couple of times I wrote, the very first jingle I wrote, I think was for a Mercedes-Benz spot. And I did a version of the song, Got the World on a String, which was made famous by Sinatra, and it was written by Harold Arlen and these really famous writers. And I had no idea who they were or what the song was. I just heard the original, and I wrote a completely different song and used some of the lyrics. And it wound up becoming a Mercedes-Benz commercial. And I thought, like, oh, great. This is excellent. I'll do this all the time. I'm going to be rich.
All the time. Right.
But
no problem.
I soon found out that, I was really fortunate that first one went national and was a nice spot. And it probably took another 4, 5, 10 tries to get another spot that went through, and maybe it wasn't quite as big of a commercial. So it takes, I've had friends that are really great songwriters and talented people that just knew, like, after 1 or 2 attempts that it was not for them. They were like, I don't like that feeling of rejection when I know that I've put in good work.
Yeah, that's certainly an element. I've done a little bit of it off and on, and I kind of put myself in that camp of not about the thin skin so much as, for me, it was, which you could probably speak more to the sort of quick turnaround times.
Oh my
that
gosh.
was
Yeah.
the crazy. I mean, maybe you could speak a little bit about that, because for me, that was sort of, after a while, that was sort of the deal breaker for me. I was like, okay, I have to write and record a song in 24 hours. Stay up all night basically. They want something that sounds like like a record, and then you might not get it.
Right. I think that actually adds to the whole being able to be accepting of it. If, somebody is really
True.
like, hey, we want this thing, but you're the last call. The video is done. It's been edited. We want it on the air on Monday. It's Saturday, right? And so you can start working Saturday night and all day into Sunday and send it to them and get comments and come back and change it and blah, blah, and have it delivered to them by Sunday night. So you're, like you said, you're staying up most of the night. And you're working feverishly and as hard as you can, and often like starting over and doing more work. And it's really, really, it can be very intense.
Sure.
And so, that does turn off a lot of people. And there, I have a friend who does a lot of television and film work. He doesn't do commercials because commercials, tend to be the ones that really have the very quick turnaround.
Right. Okay.
And so he flat out he doesn't like to say no to anything, but he does say no to those because he knows his style. He doesn't think that quickly. He's not one of these person that can just like that has the facility on a number of instruments to just be bang, 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 bang and be creating. He's a drummer that plays other instruments also. And so it takes him a little more time to get his ideas together. And he's like, that world is just not what I'm built for. So, but he realized it pretty early on and just moved on from it. Yeah. It can be super, it can cause anxiety. Yeah, no. One of my friends actually wound up in the hospital. He was so stressed about trying to get the deadlines done and thought he was having a heart attack. It turned out to just be anxiety, but
anxiety, right?
Yeah.
No, the times that I did it, man, I certainly could see that. It's just I was like, after a while, I was like, wow, okay, this is probably like a 20-year-old's game. Probably,
or so there are guys that these guys. There are guys that play keyboards and guitar equally well. You know what I mean? And just like they can sit and program drums like just rapid fire. I don't know what it is. It seems like they don't even have to think.
Right.
Those are the guys, you know what I mean? Because they can actually, in that deadline, they can give them 3 choices or something.
They have the facility to sort of do it very, very quickly.
Yeah, and they're not even just writing one track in the 24 hours and making it sound like a record. They're doing multiple tracks.
They're doing like 3. Right?
Yeah.
And then you can't be a perfectionist either, even though you have to strive for perfection. So for somebody like myself who will spend, years on a record, it's like that's horrifying to me.
Right. Yeah, that actually doing that before I really started making my own children's records, that I think helped me be some of my friends are like, "Oh, you're so prolific with the children's music and stuff." And my feeling is just like, that's how I learned to be. I can't sweat the little details, and I don't get precious about it. I just do what I think is the best in that moment, and keep moving on and keep going to the next song and stuff. So I was I've able in 6 years or 7 years I put out 6 albums. So and played with the Giants and did the other and I'm also a physical therapist and I have a family. So I think being in the jingle world prepared me to be able to do that.
Prepared you for sure.
Yeah, to be
to let go of that a little bit.
To just know like it's good enough. It's keep going.
Right. Right.
So
now you mentioned releasing your own records. I wanted to talk about that. I thought we'd wrap things up by talking about your own personal work in children's music. Now, separate from the Giants, you've released, as you mentioned, multiple albums in the family genre under your own name. And what I particularly love about your work, personally, aside from it just being super tuneful, is that it's obviously aimed at children, but it's smart. Like you never talk down to kids. And I'm thinking maybe because it's clever, adults seem to connect, with the music as well. Like some examples of this philosophy that come to mind are like a tune like Hyperbole or the song Reason for It All on your latest release, Lullabies. Can you talk a little about your sort of unique approach to making this kind of music?
Sure. And thanks for doing your homework. Yeah, no, I do appreciate it.
I'm a fan, man.
Yeah,
so
no,
it's
I
it's all
appreciate
good.
that you listen even to the newest stuff. Yeah, I don't know that it's unique to me, but I think that my general attitude towards making that music is that part of it is that I do it because I enjoy it, and playing with They Might Be Giants and getting on stage and singing a song like "I'm a Paleontologist" or "Where Do They Make Balloons" or something.
One of my favorites too. I love that.
I'd never been a lead singer, right? So for me to get up on stage and be singing the lead with their audience supporting me, and the reaction of kids and parents in the audience, that was like just such a tremendous feeling. And I thought, like, wow, if I can do this on my own and have that response, this is something that I want to do. So I enjoy the performing part of it, but then I want to enjoy the recording part of it. So it's kind of, I feel like at one point with They Might Be Giants, just to go off on a little tangent, around 2000, we were working on the Malcolm in the Middle television show. We were doing all the incidental music for that show, but we were also recording our rock albums. And we had started our first children's record, which was called No. And so we had a regular standing schedule where we'd be in like Monday and Tuesdays of every week or something recording. But there were so many things going on that it got to a point where we were showing up in the studio and we'd be recording numerous tracks all day. But we were realizing that like we'd do tracks and we didn't know, as the musicians, we didn't know if the song was intended for a kid's record, for the television, or for a rock record.
Right. It was all a jumble of all the work that you were doing.
It was so many different things. And the approach to the children's music was the same as if it was a rock album. We just wanted to make the songs sound as good as we could. We weren't thinking like, oh, this is for children, we need to be gentle, or maybe we need to, use toy instruments or whatever it is. We really didn't change anything about setup or our approach to performing the music. The only thing that was really child specific were the lyrics.
Right.
And even those, when the Johns started writing their songs, they weren't really dumbing it down. They were just not using curse words, or morbid thoughts or something. So I really liked that sort of approach and thought I would do my best, and I don't know that I did. I really feel like the Giants did it full on. Like the music on their children's records is fantastic. If you took away the lyrics, it still to me sounds just as good as any other TMBG music or other bands' music. I try to keep that same approach for my music and write songs and melodies and chord progressions and use instruments that I like and enjoy playing. And I have, I like you, I have a real soft spot in my heart for pop.
Sure.
Whether it's Beatle type pop or pop from the 70s or even contemporary pop. I love a really good melody and I love a pop song. I love a hook. So,
and that's evident in what you do in your music for sure.
Yeah, it's joyful for me to write music like that. So I try to have that approach. And actually, out of the 6 albums or so that I've produced, one of them called Inside I Shine, I tried to write songs with maybe a slightly younger audience in mind. Because some of the music out there for kids is like for preschool kids.
True.
I would say that the stuff that I write is more for elementary, maybe 5 or 4 to 10 or 11 or so. So I thought, well, let me see if I can write some stuff for the younger kids. And I wrote that album and I did my best to continue to keep the music, not talking down to kids and keep the lyrics not talking down to kids. But it was really, really hard for me to sort of do it like that. I feel much more comfortable just saying, all right, what's a topic that kids learn about? Okay, they like paleontology, they like dinosaurs, they need to learn about words, so I'm going to write a song about alliteration.
Right.
And then I can learn about alliteration and then put it into the song. Or I can look up, I can write a song about elephants for They Might Be Giants and look up facts about elephants that are actually based on, elephants' lifespans and the way that they travel and the way that they communicate, and put that into a song. And so I'm learning as I'm constructing the song, and then in hopes that when the child and the family or the teacher hear the song, they will in turn maybe be more curious and look into the topic, and they could maybe start that as like an intro to a lesson. Like, here's a song about elephants. It talks about, their tusks digging in the dirt and using for fighting. And then they communicate with infrasound waves through the ground. What is this all about? Let's look into it more. And you could spend a whole half hour or 45-minute class talking about elephants and the science behind it. So my feeling is like that can be an intro to a topic. But it makes it so much more fun and interesting to me if I work on topics that I find, or I think that I would have enjoyed as a child.
Right. That you think you would have found interesting, and it's educational and it's fun.
Yeah.
And
and the hook would have grabbed me, if I heard,
right.
Some of these songs, like the Hyperbole, for example, which is a song on my next to last, the penultimate release that I put out, which was an album called Words. It was shortly after Adam Schlesinger from Fountains of Wayne and Ivy and Broadway, et cetera. He had passed away from COVID.
Right.
And I was deeply hurt by that. Adam and I had worked with Fountains of Wayne, but also with David Mead and a number of other situations. He even worked with They Might Be Giants at one point with us. And he was an incredibly talented person and a good friend and a funny person and super smart and all that. So he passed, and I had already started working with the idea that I would make an album with word concepts. And, I started to think about Hyperbole, and then, in writing the music for that song, I thought like, well, what if Fountains of Wayne did this song? And, you probably could pick it up, especially if you listen to it now that I've revealed it. But, there's in the solo section of there's a nod to Stacey's mom.
Right.
There's a nod to Weezer. The beginning of the solo is like actually a Weezer melody. And then, the way the chords and the modulation for the guitar solo, there's a lot of elements.
Very Stacey's mom.
Right. That are very sort of, in my mind, are some of the things that Fountains of Wayne did really well. And it's a big pop song with big guitars and
sure.
And nice harmonies on the chorus and that sort of thing that my son Kai actually sang. So, in so many ways that was satisfying to me. I got to, honor my friend in my own personal way and write about something that was interesting to me and create something new. So it's a very satisfying part of, the big picture of my music life.
For sure, man. That's great. Everything you say is very true, about how you sort of put these things together. It's fun, it's educational, it's catchy, going back to that AM radio Beatles, Stairway to Heaven, Helen Reddy, it's all in there, man. You can hear it. But hey, man, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate you taking the time out.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure. And, I look forward to, days of COVID now, everything seems to be remote, but I look forward to seeing you in person, Mark.
Yeah, man. We really have to do that for sure.
Yeah. We'll have a drink and toast to music and life.
That's for sure. That's a definite, man. And so much continued success to you, man.
Likewise.
Before we let you off the hook, you're going to do a song for us, right?
Sure, and I'll ask my son. My son Kai will be singing the harmonies on it since he did it on the record. The song is called Hyperbole. It's a song we were just talking about from the album Words, and we'll do a nice acoustic version for you guys.
Fantastic. All right, well, let's get right to it. Here's Danny and Kai Weinkauf on Queens Creative.
I'd like to tell you something as a matter of course, but right now I'm so hungry I could eat a horse. My grandma stays so healthy, takes her vitamin pills. That's why my dad keeps saying she's as old as the hills. All these exaggerations, tell me what can they be? When they are used for emphasis, that's hyperbole. All these exaggerations, such a puzzle to me. when they are used to make a point that's hyperbole. Hyperbole, hyperbole. My friend ate so much pizza, asked him how does it fit? How does it fit? He told me that his stomach was a bottomless pit. Bottomless pit. When jumping in our garden like a couple of frogs. Until it started raining down like cats and dogs. All these exaggerations, tell me what can they be? When they are used for emphasis, that's hyperbole. All these exaggerations, such a puzzle to me. When they are used to make a point, that's hyperbole. Hyperbole, hyperbole. My girlfriend's name is Shelley, she's as sharp as a pin, as skinny as a toothpick and as fast as the wind. She lugs around her backpack, man, that thing weighs a ton. But reading Harry Potter makes her shine like the sun. Harry Potter sun. All these exaggerations, tell me what can they be? When they are used for emphasis, that's hyperbole. All these exaggerations, such a puzzle to me. When they are used to make a point, that's hyperbole. All these exaggerations, tell me what can they be? When they are used for emphasis, that's hyperbole. All these exaggerations, such a puzzle to me. When they are used to make a point, that's hyperbole. Hyperbole, hyperbole, hyperbole. Thank you.
Big thanks to Danny Weinkauf for hanging at Queens Creative and taking the time out to talk with us. To learn more about Danny and his work, visit DannyWeinkauf.com. That's DannyWeinkauf.com. All right, that just about does it for this episode of QC. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your pods, and please visit Queens Public Television on the web at qptv.org. QPTV can also be found on Facebook at facebook.com/Queens Public Television and on Twitter and Instagram, we're at QPTV. The executive producer of Queens Creative is Daniel J. Leone. Queens Creative was produced, written, recorded, and mixed by yours truly. Thanks for listening. I'm Mark Bacino. Until next time, see you folks.